Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Anne and today I'm giving you my mid-year check-in or the mid-year book freakout tag. This is the video I look forward to most every year because it's just so much fun for some reason to look back on everything I've read in the first half of the year, talk to you about the books I enjoyed, the books I didn't, the surprises I've encountered. And so many people film this video and everyone is always so enthusiastic. I always think it's just a very fun part of the year. So I'm very excited to film this one. First, let's get some statistics out of the way, or actually just one statistic, I think. And that's how many books I've read so far this year. I managed to read 50 books in the first half of the year, which is unreal for me. This has never happened before. There was a time when I struggled to read 50 books in a year when that seemed impossible, and now I've read 50 books in 6 months. And I have to admit that I really worked for this goal in especially June but also May, because in the first 4 months of the year I read 25 books, and then in the next 2 months, May and June, I also read 25 books. But it was a lot of fun to really focus on reading in June and to strive towards this goal and to reach it. And I also am having just the best reading year. I've already given out so many 5 stars because I've just enjoyed a lot of the books that I've read. Which brings us immediately to the first question of the mid-year book freakout tag, which is: what was your favorite book of the year so far? And I'm already cheating on this one because I don't want to choose just one. I've got a stack of 6 books that were my favorites. I've also made a reel of this on Instagram, so you may have already seen these. Let's see if I can get them in order, if I can remember that correctly. I'm just going to go through these quickly because otherwise we'll be here all day. My first 5-star read of the year was an absolute banger, and it was The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This was actually one of the books that I wanted to read last year, but I didn't get around to it, so I'm so glad that I managed to read it in January because this was absolutely amazing. It's a BookTube favorite, now I know why. It was so good. Then I read, I think it was A Psalm for the Wild Build by Becky Chambers. Becky Chambers is one of my favorite authors, and this book cemented her as my #1 favorite author. The sequel to this is coming out soon, which I will talk about for one of the next questions. This was just so good. I love Becky Chambers. She writes amazing sci-fi and her books make me so happy. Then we had, I think next up was probably Gallant by V.E. Schwab. V.E. Schwab is also one of my favorite writers. I was really looking forward to this book. It's kind of spooky and dreamy. The writing style is incredible. I flew through this. I loved it. Then we had... Yikes. Next up we have a non-fiction book, which I don't read many of anyway, and I never really loved them as much as I love this one. It's The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. John Green is also one of my favorite writers, and this was just such a joy to read. I'll talk about it a little later as well. Then there was his brother, because this year I also read An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. I didn't know what to expect of this one, but I absolutely adored it. I've already bought the sequel. I really want to read that in the second half of the year. This was amazing. And then the final book, which is one I read in June, was Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This cemented Emily Henry as one of my favorite authors, definitely one of my favorite romance authors. This was such a joy to read. It made me very happy. So that was my stack of favorite books of the year so far. There were many more 5 stars beyond these even, but these were definitely my favorites. So then we move on to question number 2, which is: what was your favorite sequel of the year so far? And for that I have to say The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin, which is also a book I read in June. I read the 5th season at the end of 2021 and absolutely loved it. I gave it 5 stars, and I really want to read the 3rd book, which is The Stone Sky, in July, because I'm really invested in this story now. I'm still remembering all the details because the world building in this book, in this series, is very extensive, and I love that about it. This series is so original, it's one of a kind. It feels kind of groundbreaking in the way the world building is done. The characters are amazing, and if you want to know more about this book, I talk some more about it in my June wrap-up. It's a lot to explain and I don't want to get into it all right now, but definitely recommend this series. It's called The Broken Earth Trilogy. It's amazing. If you love fantasy, if you love sci-fi and speculative fiction, I highly recommend it. Question number 3 is a new release you want to read but haven't read yet. And for that, I had to think for a while because I've read most of the new releases that I wanted to read in the first half of the year because there weren't that many of them. I haven't really been paying attention to new releases. There are some coming up in the second half of the year that I want to read, but one book that I found out about in the first half of the year that I haven't read yet is The Romantic Agenda by Claire Kahn. I've read one book by Claire Kahn before, which is Let's Talk About Love, and The Romantic Agenda came out this year, like I said, and I've bought it for the bookstore that I work at, and I've been looking at it for a while now, but the paperback is quite expensive. It's over 20 euros, so that's why I haven't bought it yet, but I think I'm going to because I'm really excited to read this. Claire Kahn writes about asexual characters. She's asexual herself. I'm also on the asexual spectrum. It's just so nice to read that in a book, and I really like her writing style. Let's Talk About Love was really wonderful and warm and wholesome, so The Romantic Agenda will probably be really good as well, and I'm really in the mood lately for wholesome, cozy, romantic books. The next question is, what is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year? And for me that's definitely the sequel to A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. The sequel is called A Prayer for the Crowned Shy. These titles are so weird, but I love it. And it's actually coming out in a few days. I think by the time that this video has gone up, it is already out. I think the release date is the 12th of July. It's currently the 9th of July. I'm so excited to read this. I bought this pretty soon after it was released last summer, but I didn't read it for some reason. I only read it in February or March, but I'm really definitely going to read the sequel very soon because it's so wonderful. It's also sci-fi. I love sci-fi. It's very hopeful and wholesome. There's a lot of green and a lot of love of nature in these books, and I really love that. The next question is, what was your biggest disappointment of the year so far? And that is definitely White Sargasso Sea by Jean Rhys for me. This was one of the books on my top 10 books I have to read in 2022 because it's been on my shelves for quite some time, and I thought that I would really enjoy this because this book is inspired by Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, and the Bronte sisters are so fascinating to me. I love their books. I love everything about them. I'm currently reading a book about them. So I thought I would really enjoy this because this was also said to be a kind of a feminist response to the Mad Woman in the Attic, the first Mrs. Rochester, who is a part of Jane Eyre. This was supposed to be her story, the story in which she got a voice, and it fell completely flat to me. It didn't feel feminist at all. I didn't like the main character. I felt the writing wasn't very good. I just all around didn't have a good time reading this, so that was very disappointing. The next question is, what was your biggest surprise of the year? And for that I have to say The Brothers Green, both of them. I was really surprised, first of all, that I loved the Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green so much, because like I said, I don't read much non-fiction, but these essays were delightful, they were wonderful, they were hopeful, but they were also realistic. It's really about the state of humanity, the state of the world, but also about what makes humanity so wonderful and so great, and what makes us love things, what makes culture happen. John Green goes into a lot of different things. He reviews many different things, many different concepts or objects or parts of our culture in this book, from the plague and viral meningitis to velociraptors, Diet Dr. Pepper, CNN, sunsets. It's just a very broad range of things, and I was enthralled by it. I love John Green's writing. I love the way his mind works, so I love this. I really shouldn't be so surprised by that because I know I love his writing and the way his mind works from his fiction books, but I think I wasn't expecting to love his non-fiction this much. And then I also definitely have to say an absolutely remarkable thing. I wasn't expecting to love this as much either. I was a bit apprehensive about this going in because this seems to be a book that you either love or hate. I've seen very little in between. There are some people who really adore it, just like I do. And then there are some people who say they really don't get why people love this book, that it wasn't good to them at all, that they thought it was mediocre, not very well written, etc. And I was a bit afraid that I would fall in the latter camp, but I loved it. If you want to know more about my thoughts, I recommend watching my May wrap-up because I go into it a bit more. But yeah, this was definitely one of my favorite books of the year, which was a surprise. The next question is your favorite new author. This can be either new to you or a debut author. And I looked at the 5-star reads I've had so far this year, and there were quite a few rereads there. At least I think there were 5 rereads there, which I'm not really counting in this video. And then most of the other books were books by authors I've already read from in the past. So there weren't that many new authors for me this year. And the one that I really loved the most was The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. So Erin Morgenstern is definitely my answer for this one. She has such a unique way of writing and of constructing a story, of sucking you into her world, of telling this amazing story. And this is the only book I've read so far by her, of course, but I did pick up The Starless Sea soon after finishing The Night Circus because I do definitely want to read this soon. In fact, I actually was more attracted to the idea of The Starless Sea, but because I already owned The Night Circus, I wanted to read that one first. Who knows when I'll end up reading it, but I'm really hoping that I'll love it as much as The Night Circus. The next question is, what is your newest fictional crush? And I don't really get fictional crushes, but I think I would have to say Charlie from Book Lovers, because he was such a wonderful character. Bit of a grumpy character, which I really love. And this also leads into the next question, which is, what is your new favorite character, or a new favorite character from this year so far? And I would also have to say Nora from Book Lovers. She is the main character. We see the story through her eyes and I really loved her. And the other answer for this would have to be Nina Riva from Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which I also read in May. I really loved her. I thought she was a wonderful character. Taylor Jenkins Reid has such a way with writing characters and with really building personalities. Nina Riva is a great example of that. But overall, I don't really have favorite characters, at least not many of them. There's never one that really springs to mind straight away. The characters are not really the things that I remember from books, I guess. I really mostly remember the stories or the writing or the world building or just the overall vibe. It isn't the characters that stick with me mostly. The next question is, what is a book that made you cry? And I know there was one book that had me misty-eyed for a little bit, but I don't really remember which one it was. I think it was These Witches Don't Burn by Isabel Sterling. I definitely teared up a little bit while reading this. This is a reread, and I didn't really want to mention rereads in this video because I like to focus on new books that I've read, but this is definitely the one that made me most emotional. I already knew what was coming. I knew it was going to be difficult, but still, it made me not cry, but tear up a little bit. I don't really cry at books. It happens very rarely. For the question, a book that made you happy, I have to answer Book Lovers again. This was such a wonderful read. This is Emily Henry's newest book. It came out this year and I absolutely adored it, like I said already. It has some of the elements that I really love in a book. It's set in a small town, which I adore, but it also is partly set in New York, which I really like as well. So that made for a great contrast. It is a love story, which is great. It is set partly in a bookstore. The characters are both bookish characters, as the title already suggests. Nora is a literary agent and Charlie is a literary editor. They have to work together. It's kind of a bit enemies to lovers. It's definitely enemies to lovers, which is not necessarily my favorite trope, but I don't hate it either. I really do enjoy it. And it was just so much fun. It wasn't even that light because there is some trauma to work through for these characters as well. There's definitely more going on than just the love story. But I just had a blast reading this and it put a smile on my face, which was really nice. The next question is your favorite book to film adaptation that you've seen this year. And I think many of us will have the same answer to this, even though I didn't think of it right away. I was thinking, did I even see a book to film adaptation this year? And then I thought, of course I did. I watched Heartstopper, just like every single one of us basically. This is of course a series and not a film, but it counts because it's adapted to the screen. I've watched Heartstopper 2 times now. I'm gearing up to watch it a third time with my boyfriend because I want to force him to watch it to see how wonderful it is. I love these books. I've talked about them many a time on this channel. I adore Nick and Charlie and I'm so glad that they've now found a bigger audience, a wider audience. I've loved seeing so many people come into the bookstore where I work to buy Heartstopper. It really was unlike anything I've ever seen. So many people came to buy the books. That's just so wonderful that so many people get to experience this story that's about LGBTQIA plus people in a positive way. It's not just about their hardships and their heartbreak and the discrimination. No, it's about them living their best lives, enjoying themselves, falling in love, having friends, going through all the things that people go through in high school. It was the best thing. The series is absolutely magnificent. They couldn't have done it better, I think. They kept the things from the books that were wonderful, and they really stuck to it quite closely in terms of frames and dialogue, but they also added things and changed things around a bit that really fit the medium of a TV series very well. They added more Tara and Darcy, which I think everyone loved. It was just great, and I can't wait to watch it again. And the next question is, what is the most beautiful book you've bought or received so far this year? And I have the feeling I'm forgetting about a book, but I can't really think of one book that was extraordinarily beautiful. But I do think that Gallant is a very pretty book. I love the cover with the two houses and all the roses, and the end papers of this are very gorgeous as well. And then within the book there are also illustrations that are also part of the story, and I'm trying to find one. The book is upside down in the dust jacket. That's stupid. Well, anyway, there's a very pretty house on the front of the book too. Here are the end papers, now that they're not upside down. There are these kinds of illustrations in here as well. I think it's a very pretty book, and it's also a wonderful book. So that's a great combination. And then the last question is, which books do you need to read by the end of the year? And as most of you will probably know, I make a list at the start of every year of 10 books that I have to read before the end of the year. This is kind of a list of books that I want to stick to, because these are books that have been on my shelves for a long time, or books that I feel like I will not read if I don't put them on the list, even though I do definitely want to read them at some point. These are often books that intimidate me in some way, or that I just keep forgetting about. An Absolutely Remarkable Thing was on there, White Sargasso Sea was on there, but I've still got 6 more of them to read. Even though I've already read 50 books, there were only 4 from that list. They are Beyond Time, which is a collection of classic science fiction tales about time and time travel. Then there is The Bass Rock by Evie Wyld, which is a book my parents gifted me for my birthday last year, and I really want to read it because it sounds amazing. Then there's Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, which is a book that has been on my radar for a very long time, but which I found in a little free library at the end of the year, and I figured I was probably not going to read it soon, so I'm putting it on this list. Then there's Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. There's always at least one classic on this list. We've got Renegades by Marissa Meyer, which is a book I keep forgetting about but really do want to read. And then there's the book that's been on my TBR and on my shelves for the longest, and it's The Brontes, A Life in Letters by Juliet Barker. I've actually started reading this one this month. I'm on page 24, and I'm really enjoying it so far. So that's really good. And those are the books I definitely want to read before the end of the year. There are of course many more of them, but these are the main priority. And that also concludes this video. I had a lot of fun filming this. Like I said, I always love looking back on the first half of the year and everything that I've read. This tag is such a great way to do that. If you've also filmed this book tag, please let me know, because I love watching them as well. In a comment down below, please let me know what was your favorite book of the year so far, or your least favorite book of the year. Let's chat about it. I love chatting in the comments. Please like this video if you liked it, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of me in the future. And have a wonderful day. Bye!